The day my sister left her son on my porch started like every other Friday. I'd just come home from base, boots still dusty from the flight line, and was looking forward to a microwave dinner and 10 minutes of silence before the next round of emails from command. Then, the doorbell rang. At first, I thought it was one of the neighbor kids selling cookies. But when I opened the door, I saw Carla, hair messy, eyes red, holding the hand of a boy who wouldn't look up. She had that look she always had when she was about to do something selfish but was going to call it brave. "Dana, I just need the weekend," she said, voice shaking like she'd rehearsed it in the car. I need a break, please." Her son, Owen, 5 years old, stood behind her in a hoodie that looked 2 sizes too big. He rocked slightly, heel to toe, his hands pressed over his ears. I recognized the signs right away. I'd seen soldiers do the same thing after blasts trying to block out the world. "Carla, what's going on?" I asked. "Just a weekend," she repeated. "I'll call you Sunday." But she was already walking back to her car, fast. No hug, no goodbye, just taillights disappearing down the street. The kid didn't move. He stood there, staring at the porch floor. The air was cold, and I could see his breath. I said softly, "Hey buddy, want to come inside?" "Nothing. Just rocking." I picked up his tiny backpack. It felt too light for a weekend. 1 toothbrush, 1 t-shirt, and a stuffed plane that looked like it had been through a war of its own. I opened the door wider and waited. After a full minute, he walked past me into the house, still covering his ears. The fridge hummed, and he flinched. The heater clicked on, and he pressed his hands tighter. I moved slowly, turned off what I could. My house suddenly felt like a minefield of sound. He crouched in the corner near the bookshelf, knees pulled to his chest. "You hungry?" I asked. No response. "Thirsty?" He rocked faster. I filled a cup with water, yellow plastic, one I kept from his last visit months ago. I set it on the floor, arm's length away. He looked at it, then at me, then back at the cup. After a long pause, he took it. 3 small sips. No words. Dinner was worse. I made chicken nuggets and fries because Carla once told me that's all he'd eat. He turned away from the plate. "Pasta? No." "Sandwich?" He pushed it back. "Crackers?" 3, maybe 4. Every attempt felt like a test I didn't know the rules to. Bedtime? A disaster. He screamed when I tried to help him brush his teeth, not crying, screaming. I stepped back, and he stopped. I told him he could skip it. Tried to tuck him in. He threw the blanket off. Tried again. He screamed louder. So I left the blanket folded at the foot of the bed, said goodnight from the doorway, and let him be. I didn't sleep that night. I heard him humming, a low monotone sound that filled the hallway, the kind of noise that sits in your bones. I'd led night drills and thunderstorms quieter than that. Saturday morning, I called Carla. No answer. Left a voicemail. "Call me back. I need to know what he eats, what his routine is." Nothing. Called again, and again. By Monday, I'd called 10 times. By Tuesday, I called my base commander and asked for a week's emergency leave. "Family issue," I said. That was true enough. I took Owen to the pediatrician. The doctor, a young woman with kind eyes, said what I already knew. "He's autistic. Has anyone discussed evaluation or therapy?" "His mother was supposed to handle that," I said. The doctor nodded like she'd heard that 100 times. "Well, now you're handling it." And that's how it began. Therapy sessions. Speech, occupational, behavioral, the works. I learned his world ran on patterns. Breakfast had to be the same every day. Scrambled eggs, toast cut corner to corner, nothing touching. The drive to therapy had to be the same route, same songs, same red lights if we could help it. I learned not to touch him unless he started it. I learned that love wasn't hugs, it was silence, space, and structure. I got good at watching, instead of fixing. 2 weeks later, I found him sitting on the living room floor at dawn, lining up toy cars I'd bought him. I thought he was just playing. Then I noticed the order by color, from red to orange to yellow to green. The gradient was so perfect it looked computer-generated. "That's amazing, Owen," I said. He didn't look up, but I swear his rocking slowed a little. Just for a second. Weeks went by. Carla still hadn't called. I stopped waiting. We settled into a pattern. Breakfast at 7. Therapy at 9. Quiet hour after lunch. I didn't push conversation anymore. I let the silence be our language. Then came Christmas Eve. I was baking sugar cookies. He didn't help, just sat at the table watching me cut shapes. The kitchen smelled like vanilla and butter. The phone rang. My heart jumped. I grabbed it. "Dana," Carla's voice said, flat and tired. "Carla, thank God. When are you coming to get him? He needs you. I need to know what's—" "I can't do this anymore, Dana," she said. "He's yours." "What?" "I tried, I really tried, but I can't." "Carla, wait." The line went dead. I called back. Voicemail. Again. Nothing. I stood there holding the phone while the cookies burned. Smoke curled up from the oven. I turned it off and pulled the tray out. Blackened cookies. Useless. I sat on the floor, phone still in my hand, the house too quiet except for that low hum again. A few seconds later, Owen appeared in the doorway. He looked at me, really looked, for the first time since he'd arrived. Then he walked to the counter, picked up his yellow cup and brought it over. Set it on the floor next to me. I stared at the cup, then at him. He turned and went back to the living room. I broke down right there, sitting on the kitchen floor with a burnt cookie sheet and a plastic cup between my knees. I wasn't crying for me. I was crying because I knew he understood something without words, something that most adults never get. He didn't need comfort. He gave it. The next morning, I made eggs and toast again. Corner to corner, nothing touching. He ate quietly, methodically, like the world hadn't just ended the night before. I realized then that this was our new mission. Stability. The military teaches you to plan for chaos, but no one teaches you to raise a child who can't stand noise. Still, we adapted. I'd handled worse situations under fire. And somehow, between his silence and my structure, we started to find a rhythm, one that didn't need words to work. The morning after Christmas, I woke up before dawn. The house was quiet except for the faint hum of the fridge and the sound of snow melting off the roof. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the clock on the wall. 0600 hours. My body still ran on base time, but now my mission briefing was a 5-year-old boy who didn't talk and didn't want to be touched. So I did what the Air Force trained me to do, establish a routine. Predictability saves lives on the field, and apparently, it also keeps breakfast on the table for a kid who hated surprises. Eggs. Toast. Yellow cup on the right side of his plate. Every morning, the same. He wouldn't say a word, but if I cut the toast wrong, he'd push the plate away. It didn't take long before I realized that structure wasn't just comfort to him, it was safety. By the end of the week, we had a system. I woke him at 0700, breakfast at 0715, therapy at 0900, grocery stop at 1000, 300, cartoons at 1000, 600, bedtime at 2000. My house started to feel like a base again, tight schedule, low noise, and one very small commanding officer who ran the show without saying a word. He didn't smile much, but I started to see signs of calm. He'd hum the same note softly when things felt okay. If the hum changed pitch, I knew we were in trouble. Once, the power flickered during a storm, and that hum turned sharp and fast like an alarm. I got down on the floor beside him and said, "It's okay. Power's just out." Then I did the dumbest thing, I started humming too. Off-key, terrible. But it worked. His tone softened. For the first time, he looked at me just a glance, but it was enough. I learned more from those small moments than any parenting book could ever teach. Every Friday, he'd line up objects, pencils, spoons, paper clips by size or shade. Once, he arranged my medals on the coffee table in perfect symmetry. I walked in, ready to tell him not to touch them, then stopped. He'd placed my Air Force Achievement Medal dead center, flanked by 2 commendations, perfectly aligned by the ribbon's colors. It was flawless. "That's actually regulation perfect," I said. He didn't react, but something in me did. The next week at therapy, Dr. Lin, his behavioral therapist, asked if I'd noticed patterns. I almost laughed. "Patterns are his first language," I said. She nodded. "Then that's how you'll reach him. Find his pattern and join it." That line stuck with me. It sounded like something my old commanding officer would have said. Different mission, same logic. Months passed. Spring came. The snow melted, and we started walking to the park. He didn't play with other kids, just sat on the bench counting leaves or tracing cracks in the pavement. Once, another parent tried to make small talk. "He's quiet," she said, with that tone people use when they think they're being kind but really mean strange. "Yeah," I said. "Quiet's underrated." She didn't know what to say after that. By his 6th birthday, I had a stack of notebooks filled with his progress notes, therapy summaries, and meal plans. Everything labeled, dated, cross-referenced military precision applied to motherhood. I called it Operation Stability. That summer, I started noticing something new. He'd sit at the fridge, rearranging the magnetic letters. Not to spell, but to group them. A next to V, V next to X, according to some code only he understood. Then came the notebooks. Circles, lines, dots, symbols that didn't mean anything to me but clearly meant everything to him. I asked Dr. Lin about it. "He's tracking his world," she said. "It's how he makes sense of things. Let him." So I did. I bought him more notebooks. He filled them one after another. When I tried to clean, he'd notice instantly if one was out of order. His world had rules, and I learned to live by them. By 7, the symbols turned into letters, then words: egg, toast, home, car, each one written in perfect block handwriting, like a pilot checklist. I taped his first full sentence to the fridge: "Eat at 7." It wasn't poetry, but it was progress. One morning, I was making breakfast, same as always. He was writing quietly at the table. Then he said it his first real question: "Why did Mom leave?" I froze. The spatula nearly slipped from my hand. I turned, trying to keep my voice steady. She said she couldn't handle it. He didn't look up, just nodded once and went back to his notebook. I stood there for a second, not knowing whether to cry or salute him for handling that truth better than most adults could. After that day, he started asking more. Not constantly, just when something connected. "Why do you wear that uniform? Why is your name on your jacket? Why do people salute you?" Because order means something, I wanted to say. Because it's the only thing that ever kept me from falling apart. Instead, I told him the simple version. "It's my job. I keep people safe." And he thought about that. "You keep me safe." That one hit me harder than any medal ever could. The following year, his progress accelerated. He started talking more in therapy, asking for specific foods, correcting me when I got something wrong. Once, I switched the brand of peanut butter. "This one smells different," he said. First full spontaneous sentence. I almost wanted to frame it. The school called that fall. They wanted to move him to a special needs class. "It'll be less stressful," the principal said. "Less stressful for who?" I asked. "He struggles with group activities. He won't make eye contact. He's reading 2 grades ahead and doing math faster than your teachers. You move him, and you'll be the one struggling." Silence. They backed down. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with all his paperwork, school reports, therapy notes, and progress charts. He came in and watched me organizing everything. "What are you doing?" "Making sure no one forgets how hard you've worked," I said. He pointed at the piles. "Those go by date. The therapy ones should be blue." "Blue?" "For behavior. Red for speech. Green for school." I just stared at him. "You want to help me organize this?" "Yes." We spent the next hour labeling, sorting, and stacking until everything was color-coded to his logic. When we finished, he stood back and said, "Better." I couldn't have said it better myself. From that night on, I let him take over our organization system. He tracked appointments, noted therapy sessions, and built his own folders on my computer. When I asked why, he said, "So we don't lose the truth." At the time, I thought he meant it literally just keeping track of schedules and notes. But I'd learn later that for Owen, truth wasn't a concept. It was a pattern. He didn't care about what people said. He cared about what stayed consistent. And in a world where his own mother had vanished without warning, consistency was sacred. I started noticing something strange one morning while polishing my boots before work. The rhythm of Owen's hum in the background matched the pattern of my breathing, steady, repetitive, grounding. It was the same rhythm I used to control panic after missions. For months, I'd ignored the way my hands trembled when I heard sudden noises, or how I still checked corners in my own house. But now, watching Owen line up toy cars in perfect order, I realized we were both doing the same thing, trying to make sense of chaos through control. I'd spent years pretending I was fine. PTSD isn't something you brag about in the Air Force. You bury it under discipline and caffeine. But living with Owen forced every hidden crack to show. Loud sounds. He'd cover his ears and rock. Me? I'd freeze, jaw tight, pretending to be calm while my pulse spiked. Change in routine? He'd shut down. I'd snap at people. Different symptoms, same trigger. Unpredictability. It wasn't sympathy I felt for him, it was recognition. We were mirrors of the same survival instinct. Therapy became our shared battleground. His sessions focused on sensory regulation. Mine, mandatory after a wellness check at the base, focused on emotional processing. The military phrased everything like a checklist. Process, adjust, execute. My therapist, Dr. Reese, wasn't having it. You can't out discipline trauma, she told me. Watch me, I said. She smirked. That's not healing, that's command structure. Maybe so, but it worked at least until it didn't. One afternoon, Owen's therapist, Dr. Lynn, asked if I'd sit in during his session. He was practicing communication through shared activity. They handed me a puzzle, one of those 1,000-piece disasters that test your patience and your eyesight. Owen didn't look at me, just started sorting edges by color. No instructions, just motion. For 30 minutes, we worked side by side in silence. Then he said, "You breathe loud." I laughed. "You should hear me when I'm mad." He didn't smile, but his hands stopped shaking. That was progress. Later that week, I brought home a model jet kit from the base store. Thought it'd be something we could do together. He studied the pieces like a bomb technician. "Missing part," he said. "How can you tell?" "The pattern's off." I checked the instructions. Sure enough, one wing section missing. The kid's brain was a radar. He could detect disorder faster than any military scanner I'd ever used. Integrity equals truth plus pattern. I told him one night while he organized his books by spine width. He glanced up. Integrity? It means you do what's right even when it's hard. In the Air Force, that's rule number 1. He went back to his books. Hard for people. Yeah, I said. It usually is. Howl. That became our thing. Little lessons mixed with our routines. Every breakfast, I'd throw in a word. Integrity. Consistency. Precision. He didn't always respond, but he remembered. Sometimes he'd repeat the words later, out of nowhere, like his brain was testing how they fit. By the time he turned 9, his precision started bordering on genius. He'd time our drives to the minute, noting which traffic lights stayed red longest. Once, he told me, the light on Elm lasts 45 seconds longer than the one on Union. I laughed until I timed it myself. He was right. One day after therapy, he asked, "Why do you wear the uniform if it makes you sad?" That hit harder than I expected. "What makes you think it makes me sad? You don't blink when you talk about it." He wasn't wrong. The uniform was both pride and prison. It gave me purpose but reminded me of everything I'd lost. Friends, sleep, maybe a bit of myself. I told him the truth. Because it matters. Because someone has to hold the line. He thought about that for a long time. You hold lines, I hold patterns. Guess we're a team then, I said. Team Miles, he replied, and for the first time he smiled. That night, while I was cleaning dishes, I caught my reflection in the window, tired, older, jaw clenched, like always. Behind me, Owen was at the table, sketching shapes that looked more like circuits than doodles. It hit me then that my discipline had become his framework for peace. He didn't just need order, he absorbed it, reshaped it, made it his language. Dr. Reese once said that trauma reorganizes your brain around survival. Owen wasn't broken, he was just built differently. And maybe that's all I was too. When I had to deploy for a 3-month rotation, I nearly didn't take the assignment. But orders were orders. I called in a favor from an old friend, Lisa. She'd retired from the JAG Corps and was looking for quiet work, and I needed someone I could trust implicitly. She followed my routine to the letter. The first night away, I called to check in. "How's he doing?" I asked. Lisa said, "He asked me how long you'll be gone." "What did you tell him?" I said you'll be back on a Tuesday. Did that help? He wrote it down. I think that's enough. When I returned, the house looked exactly as I'd left it. Same meal chart on the fridge, same schedule on the wall, even the same coffee stain I'd left on the counter. But Owen had changed. He'd grown taller, calmer, more deliberate. He handed me a notebook the night I got home. What's this? Tuesday, he said. Inside were pages of neatly written notes, dates, times, things he did while I was gone. Each line time-stamped, so you'd know nothing got lost. I didn't realize I was crying until he handed me a tissue. You okay? He asked. Yeah, I said, wiping my face. Just proud. He nodded once, satisfied, and went back to his puzzle. That's when I started noticing the symmetry between us wasn't coincidence, it was survival. He managed his sensory overload the same way I managed panic, through predictability. And where I used checklists, he used data. The difference was, his brain didn't forget anything. Sometimes I wondered if my order had become his armor, if my rigidity had turned into his foundation, but maybe that wasn't a bad thing. In a world where people vanish, order can feel like love. Every night, we'd watch the same show reruns on TV. Same time, same seat, same yellow cup on the table beside him. He'd correct me if I sat on the wrong side of the couch. That's my left, he'd say. And I'd move without arguing, because I understood. There's comfort in knowing where everything belongs, even pain. One night, as I switched off the lights, he said, "You don't like when people change things either." He wasn't wrong. I froze for a second, then said, "Guess you got that from me." He looked up at me. "Is that bad?" "No, Owen," I said, smiling faintly. "That's integrity." He nodded, satisfied with that answer, and went back to his quiet hum. That hum filled the house the way the engine noise used to fill a cockpit, steady, dependable, alive. And just like that, the rhythm of our two broken worlds started sounding a lot like peace. It started with a broken printer. I was trying to print a report for base review, and the damn thing kept flashing paper jam even though it was empty. I muttered something about budget cuts and kicked it lightly, which apparently offended it further. Owen, 14 by then, walked over, looked at the display, and said, "The software loop is stuck." "The what?" "Firmware bug. I can fix it. Now." He wasn't bluffing. 10 minutes later, he had the back panel off, cables rearranged, and code flashing across his tablet. The printer hummed, blinked once, and started printing like nothing happened. I stared. "You're telling me you just debugged government-issued hardware?" He shrugged. It was inefficient. That was the understatement of the century. He'd been teaching himself programming for months without telling me. I thought the clicking I heard in his room late at night was video games. Turned out, it was code lines and lines of logic building into something bigger than either of us could imagine. When I asked where he learned it, he said, "Online forums, free tutorials." You understand all that? Understanding is pattern recognition. Right. Of course it was. He spent that whole summer glued to his computer. I'd bring him sandwiches or coffee and he'd mutter thanks without looking up. When I peeked over his shoulder once, the screen was full of numbers and brackets. "What are you working on?" I asked. "A verification algorithm." "In English?" "It checks if digital documents are real or changed." "So, like detecting fake files?" He nodded. "It reads metadata, signatures, timestamps. People lie, data doesn't." The line was so simple it made my skin crawl a little. He said it the way other kids say they like pizza. I watched him turn silence into code, trauma into logic. Every routine, every rule he'd clung to as a kid became part of his process, precise, repeatable, unbreakable. He called his first version Sentinel Chain. The name made sense. In the military, a sentinel guards the perimeter alert, never sleeping. His software did the same thing, except for truth. One evening, I found him testing a forged document. He'd created 2 identical files with 1 letter changed. When he ran his program, the screen displayed long strings of numbers that changed instantly. "That's the fingerprint," he said. "Every document has one. If it changes, it's compromised." I didn't pretend to understand the tech, but I understood integrity. And that's what his software was built for, protecting truth from manipulation. When he was 16, he decided to test it outside his room. He emailed 5 cybersecurity firms, explaining what Sentinel Chain did, and offering a demo. I warned him, companies don't usually take teenage inventors seriously. He just said, they'll check the code. 2 weeks later, one of them did a small Denver-based firm called Rock Ridge Data Systems. They asked for a trial license. He charged them $20,000. I thought he'd mistyped the number, but they paid. He showed me the transaction receipt like he was showing me his report card. I stood there in my uniform, staring at more money than my yearly bonus. Do they know you're 16? I asked. Yes. They said that makes it more impressive. That night, we ate takeout sushi for dinner. I poured myself a glass of wine, which I hadn't done in years. He just had water in his yellow cup. He didn't celebrate much, but I could see it in his posture. His version of pride was stillness. Over the next few months, the word spread. He started getting calls, interviews, and contract offers. Local tech blogs picked up the story of the autistic teen who created unbreakable verification software. I hated that phrasing, like his autism was the trick, not the talent. But publicity was publicity, and the interest snowballed. One evening, he came into the kitchen holding a letter. Anderson Security wants to buy Sentinel Chain. Buy it? I said. Completely? Yes. Full acquisition. $3.2 million. I sat down before my knees gave out. $3.2 million? He nodded calmly, as if we were discussing groceries. I reread the letter, half expecting it to dissolve into dust. You sure this is real? They verified it, he said, dead serious. He negotiated with their legal team himself. I brought in a lawyer, Linda Reyes, a sharp woman I knew from my JAG contacts who specialized in IP for veterans. Ethan didn't care about the praise. I just want to make sure it works, he said. After the deal closed, Anderson issued a press release. The local news showed up at our door, reporters, cameras, all of it. They wanted footage of the brilliant young inventor. I didn't want them inside, but Owen said, let them. The reporter, a young woman with too much energy and too little patience, asked him, what inspired you to create Sentinel Chain? He looked directly at her camera. People lie. Documents shouldn't. She blinked. That's deep. He didn't reply, just went back to his computer. That night, his story aired across Colorado. Local teen creates $3, 2M verification system. They used slow-motion shots of him typing, dramatic music, the whole emotional package. I watched it with him, waiting for a reaction. When it ended, I asked, how do you feel? He said, fine. But over the next few days, I noticed something off. He wasn't sleeping well. He'd stare out the window, quiet even by his standards. One night, I found him sitting at his desk with his old notebooks spread out, the ones filled with patterns, shapes, and timelines from when he was little. What are you looking at? I asked. Everything, he said. I need to make sure it all adds up. Adds up to what? To what's real. I didn't press him. Whatever was going on inside his head, he was organizing it. That's what he did when something didn't make sense. He searched for the pattern until he found peace in it. I went to bed early that night. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to the faint sound of his keyboard clicking. Same rhythm as always. Repetitive, calm, purposeful. I almost went to tell him to get some sleep, but something told me not to. He was working through something the only way he knew how, through order. When I left for base the next morning, the smell of coffee filled the kitchen. His yellow cup sat exactly where it always did. For the first time in years, I realized he didn't need me to hold the line anymore. He'd built one of his own, and it was made of code, not fear. The knock came 2 weeks after the news story aired. It was a Tuesday, 14 inches the afternoon, I know, because Owen logged everything down to the minute. I was wiping down the counter halfway through a second cup of coffee when the doorbell rang. Outside stood a woman in a gray suit and a man with a briefcase. It took me half a second too long to recognize her. The jawline was sharper, the hair shorter, but the smile fake, stretched thin across regret, was the same. Hi, Dana, she said. It's been a long time. My throat went dry. Carla. Her eyes flicked past me into the house. Is he here? Before I could answer, the man beside her stepped forward. I'm Mr. Walsh, legal representative for Miss Bennett. Representative. The word hit like static. Carla kept smiling. that polished, polite smile she used to give teachers when she was about to lie. I think we should talk inside. Everything in me screamed no, but my body moved anyway. Old habits: stay civil, stay calm, assess the threat. They stepped into the kitchen like they owned it. Carla's eyes went straight to the photos on the wall. Owen at the science fair. Owen holding his therapy award. Owen standing next to me at the Air Force Appreciation Dinner. She stopped at that one. "You've done a great job, Dana," she said softly. "Really, better than I ever could have." "That's true," I said. Her lawyer opened his briefcase and laid out papers across my table, the same one where Owen learned to read. "We're here regarding custody and financial guardianship of Owen Bennett," he said. "As his biological mother, Miss Bennett retains parental rights. Given his recent financial success, she wishes to resume an active role in his life." "Active role?" I said. She left him on my porch like a package. "That's not accurate," he replied smoothly. "Miss Bennett maintained consistent financial and emotional involvement through approved channels." Owen appeared in the doorway before I could respond. He didn't say anything, didn't move, just watched. "Hi, sweetheart," Carla said, her voice suddenly soft. "You've grown so much." He looked right at her, expression flat. "I don't know you." The silence that followed could have cut steel. Carla blinked, flustered, then forced a smile. "Well, that's okay. We have time to fix that." Her lawyer cleared his throat. "We'll need you to review these documents, Miss Miles. They outline Miss Bennett's prior financial support money orders, correspondence, and visitation records." I picked up the top page. The formatting was flawless: dates, signatures, even official stamps. It looked real. Too real. "These are fake," I said. "Unless you can prove that," Walsh said, "the court may rule in our favor." I laughed, short and sharp. "You're seriously trying to take custody now? After 11 years? "We're not asking for physical custody," Carla said quickly. "Just guardianship over his financial assets until he's of age. I want to help manage his future. You've done so much, but this is bigger than you, Dana." "Don't," I said. "Don't pretend this is about him." "It is," she said. "You don't understand the kind of attention this kind of money brings. He needs protection." "From who?" She paused just long enough for the answer to sting. "From you, if necessary." That was the moment I realized she hadn't just come for money. She came to erase me from the story. Walsh gathered the papers neatly. "We'll expect your legal response within 10 days. They left the same way they came in. Polite, cold, professional. The sound of their car faded down the street. Owen stood still, hands at his sides. "Are they lying?" "Yes," I said. He nodded once. "Okay." Then he went back to his room like nothing had happened. I called a lawyer that night, a woman named Linda Reyes, former JAG officer turned family attorney. She had that same military efficiency I trusted instantly. I sent her scans of every school record, every therapy note, every bank statement I'd saved. The next morning she called. "Dana, I reviewed their documents. If they're forged, they're damn good. Signatures match, dates line up, and the notary stamps check out on public record." "They're fake," I repeated. "I believe you," she said, "but belief isn't enough. We'll need proof." "I have 11 years of proof. Do you have legal guardianship papers?" That question froze me. "No. Carla never signed anything. She just left." Linda sighed. "Then technically, her parental rights were never terminated. She's still his legal guardian on paper." End quote. I felt the floor drop. "So she can just walk back in and take control?" "She can try," Linda said. "But the court will decide based on evidence and intent. We'll fight it." For the next week, I barely slept. I combed through every file cabinet, every binder, every folder Owen had ever helped me organize. There was no custody form, no signature, nothing that legally gave me authority beyond what schools or doctors had accepted informally. Owen watched me pacing one night. "They're trying to rewrite things," he said. "I know. I just don't know how to stop them." He tilted his head slightly. "Truth leaves patterns." "What does that mean?" "You'll see," he said, and turned back to his computer. The hearing date came faster than I expected. I showed up in uniform. It wasn't required, but I needed armor. Carla wore beige, the color of fake humility. She smiled at me across the table like we were sisters at brunch. Her lawyer presented the documents, first financial logs, visitation schedules, even a string of fabricated email exchanges between us, each one carefully printed, signed, and time-stamped. When it was my turn, I handed Linda the binders. She laid them out in front of the judge, years of therapy records, school attendance logs, and receipts, proving I'd paid for everything myself. The judge flipped through them, face unreadable. "Miss Miles," she said finally, "I see substantial evidence of your involvement, but I also see no formal guardianship paperwork. That complicates things." "Your Honor," Linda said, "Miss Bennett abandoned her child at age 5 and made no attempt to contact him for over a decade." Carla's lawyer jumped in. "That's false. Miss Bennett faced personal hardships, but remained in consistent communication through verified channels." "Verified by who?" I snapped. "By documentation," he said, smug. The judge raised a hand. "Let's keep it professional." "Professional?" "Sure. Nothing says professional like watching your sister weaponize paperwork against you." The hearing adjourned without resolution. The judge wanted time to review. We walked out into the hallway, the air too bright, the floor too shiny. Linda put a hand on my shoulder. "We'll get them. We just need something that proves those documents are forged." Owen walked beside me, silent as always. Outside, the wind hit hard, cold, and clean. I asked him quietly, "You okay?" He looked at me with that same unreadable calm. "Yes. You don't seem worried." He blinked once. "I'm not." "Why not?" He looked toward the courthouse door, his voice steady. "Because I already know what's real." I didn't understand what he meant. Not yet. But the way he said it calm, certain was the same way he'd talk before solving something big. And when Owen got that tone, it usually meant someone else's pattern was about to break. The first email came from an Air Force PR officer. The subject line read, "Clarification request, ongoing family litigation." That's how I learned the story had leaked. Somebody, probably Carla's lawyer, had tipped off a reporter. By lunchtime, my inbox was a swamp of statement requests and urgent verification inquiries. Apparently, the news cycle loved a scandal that mixed military discipline, family betrayal, and money. The headline that afternoon read, "Air Force Captain Under Scrutiny for Exploiting Autistic Nephew's App Fortune." I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Owen was at the kitchen table, coding like nothing was wrong. I wanted to smash the laptop in half. I called the PR officer. "It's a lie," I said. "Ma'am, we understand, but the Office of Public Affairs will need to open an internal review. Just protocol." "Protocol for what? I haven't done anything." "It's about optics, Captain. We're not saying you did." "Optics?" I said. "My life isn't a photo op." But that didn't matter. In the military, appearance is everything. Within 48 hours, I was placed on administrative leave, pending investigation. When I came home that night, Owen had already organized the printed headlines in a neat stack on the counter. "They're wrong," he said. "I know. Then why do people believe them?" "Because people believe noise," I said. He thought about that, then said, "Noise is just bad data." I didn't have the energy to laugh, but he was right. Over the next few days, things got worse. Carla's side released more evidence screenshots, bank transactions, even an email thread supposedly between me and her, discussing money transfers. Every detail looked authentic, even my digital signature. I sat on the couch, flipping through the printed pages, feeling like I was reading a version of my own life written by someone who hated me. Lisa, my old JAG friend, dropped by that night. She'd retired from the Air Force but still had connections in internal investigations. "Dana," she said, spreading the papers across the table. "These are professional-level forgeries. Whoever helped her knew what they were doing." "Her lawyer?" "Maybe. But this metadata here," she pointed at the corner of a printed email, "was exported from a secure channel. She couldn't do that herself." "You're saying she had help from inside the system?" Lisa nodded slowly. "Or from someone who used to be." That hit me hard. "Travis Keene," I said before she could. The name felt dirty in my mouth. Travis was a technician I'd served with years ago, smart, lazy, and always one step away from a misconduct report. He'd been discharged after falsifying maintenance logs. I hadn't thought about him in years. Lisa raised an eyebrow. "You still got his number?" No, but I've got his old service file. If he's involved, he'll have left a trace. For the next 2 nights, we combed through records. Owen hovered nearby, quietly observing, like he was cataloging the chaos. I showed Lisa a folder of digital forms from the forged documents. She studied them, frowning. This watermark here, she said, tapping the corner of the page, was last used on Air Force form templates 8 years ago. Nobody outside the system should have access. So it had to be someone with archived credentials. Or someone who bought them from the wrong person. Owen leaned forward. Metadata can show it. End of. Lisa smiled faintly. You think you can trace it, kid? He didn't answer, just opened his laptop. His fingers moved so fast I couldn't follow. Strings of code filled the screen, then timestamps, server IDs, location logs. I recognized only fragments, but the rhythm of his typing sounded like determination. An hour later, he stopped. There's an IP tag, he said. Denver, registered to a man named T. Keene. Lisa whistled. He's your guy. Ald. I felt a chill roll through me, not fear, but clarity. Everything was starting to make sense. The next morning, I drove to Denver in uniform. Not for intimidation habit. When you've been accused of dishonor, you wear the colors that prove you still have it. Travis answered the door of a cramped apartment, smelling of burnt coffee and bad decisions. His expression flickered between guilt and greed. Captain Miles, he said, didn't think I'd ever see you again. I wish that were mutual. How when? He tried to play it casual, leaning against the door frame. What's this about? I held up the printed email thread. Recognize this format? He smirked. Looks official. It should. You made it. He froze, then laughed weakly. You can't prove that. Owen can. His face twitched. The kid? Yeah. The kid whose software you couldn't code in 100 lifetimes. He looked away, the smirk fading. Look, she said it was just a family dispute. She paid well. I didn't know it'd blow up like this. How much? I asked. $5,000. I exhaled. You sold your honor for less than a used car. He muttered something about hard times, but I didn't care. You're going to write a statement, I said. Voluntarily. Now. I could go to jail. You could. Or you could cooperate and get a lighter sentence. Your choice. By evening, Lisa had his signed affidavit. It wasn't enough to clear me instantly, but it was the crack we needed in Carla's perfect lie. Still, damage spreads faster than truth. By the weekend, the Air Force suspended me officially. They called it Temporary Administrative Reassignment. Translation: sit down, shut up, and wait while we decide if you're a PR liability. I packed my uniform away and stared at the closet for a long time. For 20 years, the military had been my compass. Now it felt like a mirror that didn't recognize me. Owen found me there, sitting on the floor. You're not working tomorrow, he said, matter of fact. No, he nodded once. Then we can fix it. I looked up. Fix what? The data. She changed the pattern. He said it so calmly I almost didn't catch the weight of it. You think you can prove it? Yes, but I'll need access to the files she used. Lisa, sitting on the couch behind him, leaned forward. We can get a subpoena once the hearing resumes, but it might take weeks. Owen shook his head. We don't have weeks. She's uploading new versions to backdate them. How do you know that? I asked. He turned his laptop around. On the screen, lines of data pulsed in real time. Because she's doing it right now. Lisa stared. You're tracking her system live? He didn't answer, just said, truth leaves a pattern, lies leave noise. The cursor blinked, the code scrolled, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something that almost resembled hope. Not because the situation was fixed, but because Owen was right. He'd always been right. The night Owen tracked Carla's data stream, the whole house felt different, like the air itself had a pulse. His laptop glowed faint blue in the dark kitchen, lines of code crawling across the screen faster than any human could read. I leaned against the counter, half in disbelief, half in awe. She's editing the documents now, he said quietly. Look, this hash value keeps changing. That means she's re-uploading modified files. Lisa, sitting next to him, squinted. Can you prove those files came from her device? Yes, Owen said, not looking up. The packets ping through her home router. She's sloppy. That word sloppy, coming from Owen, almost made me smile. The same kid who once threw a fit over uneven toast edges was now casually talking about digital forensics like it was a board game. Lisa took notes while he explained. Each document has a unique fingerprint, he said. If even one pixel or timestamp changes, Sentinel Chain records a new signature. She doesn't know the software she's faking was built to detect her. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. Carla had tried to rewrite the truth using the one tool her son created to stop people from doing exactly that. By midnight, Owen had a full activity log timestamped uploads, IP routes, edit history, even an authentication trail showing her lawyer's system connecting to the same files. "This is good," Lisa said, rubbing her forehead. "We'll take it to the district attorney first thing tomorrow." But Owen kept typing. "Not done." "What else are you looking for?" I asked. He stopped for a second, eyes focused, and said, "Intent." Lisa frowned. "Intent isn't digital." "It is," Owen replied. "It's in the pattern. How often, how careful, how she names things. Real people make random mistakes. Liars make symmetrical ones." Lisa shot me a look that said, "He's not wrong." At 3 a.m., we had a mapped-out timeline showing every fake Carla uploaded, cross-checked with the original metadata of the supposed emails between us. All forged within 1 week of the news story about his app. The proof was solid, but what struck me most was how calm Owen remained through it all. When I finally told him to get some sleep, he said, "I'll rest after the truth matches again." I didn't argue. The next morning, we drove to the DA's office in El Paso County. The building looked too peaceful for what we were bringing in. Lisa did the talking while Owen sat beside her, laptop on his knees. The assistant DA, a tall woman named Harper, leaned forward as he pulled up the data. Owen walked her through every step, how the documents were falsified, how timestamps were altered, how his software caught the discrepancies. At one point, Harper stopped him. "You're 16? "Yes." She leaned back. "I've seen experts with half your clarity. This might be admissible." Lisa handed over Travis's signed affidavit. "We also have a confession from the accomplice who helped fabricate the files." Harper nodded slowly. "This changes everything." As we left, Lisa looked almost relieved. "They'll move on this. Once they authenticate the evidence, the judge will have to consider fraud charges." But I didn't feel relief. I felt something heavier, a mix of vindication and fatigue. I'd spent years keeping order for Owen, and now it felt like we were dragging that order through a courtroom full of people who didn't understand what it cost to maintain it. That night, the press found us again. Somehow, the story of the brilliant autistic coder fighting his manipulative mother hit the local news. They made it sound heroic, like we'd already won. But the real fight hadn't even started. The next morning, my phone buzzed non-stop. Messages from old colleagues, neighbors, people I hadn't heard from in years. Half of them offered sympathy. The other half asked if the rumors were true. Owen noticed the phone vibrating and said, "You should turn it off." "Can't," I said. "I need to stay ahead of it." He looked up from his cereal. Staying ahead and staying alive are not the same thing. It was something Dr. Reese, my old therapist, used to say to me after my deployments. Hearing it from him made me stop mid-step. Later that day, Lisa called with an update. The DA's office filed a preliminary motion for evidence review. They're bringing in a digital forensics specialist to validate Owen's logs. If it checks out, Carla's going to be in serious trouble. I didn't say anything at first. Then, "She's not going to back down." "No," Lisa said. But now she's the one playing defense. A few days later, the summons arrived for the formal hearing. The courtroom was set for a Tuesday, of course it was. Owen's favorite day. Predictable. Symmetrical. That weekend, I walked into his room to find him cleaning his desk. Not organizing cleaning. Every notebook stacked perfectly. Every pen aligned like soldiers in formation. "Big day coming?" I asked. He didn't look up. "They'll use confusion as a weapon. I'm removing variables." I leaned against the doorframe. "You nervous?" He paused. "No. You are." He was right again. Monday night, I found him printing out pages of his own code, the base structure of Sentinel Chain. He was marking lines, highlighting variables, drawing arrows. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Visual proof. They won't understand code. But they'll understand logic. I'll show them how truth behaves. You can't testify, I said. You're not a legal witness. He didn't look up. I'm not testifying. I'm demonstrating. And that word demonstrating carried the calm certainty of someone who already saw the path ahead. The morning of the hearing, the courtroom buzzed with whispers. Carla sat across from us wearing a soft gray dress, the picture of composure. Her lawyer adjusted his tie, ready to sell the performance of a lifetime. When the judge entered, Owen didn't look at him. He was staring at the projector screen where his program waited to run. Lisa leaned in and whispered, "You sure he's ready for this?" I nodded. He was born ready for patterns. As the hearing began, Carla's lawyer repeated their rehearsed lines about maternal intent and financial protection. He smiled too much. Every fake smile in that room bounced off Owen like static. Then it was our turn. Lisa stood, called Travis's affidavit into record, presented the digital logs, the timestamps, the metadata reports. The judge studied them, but didn't react. Finally, Lisa said, "Your Honor, with the court's permission, Owen Miles would like to clarify the technical details of these records." The judge hesitated, then nodded. Owen walked to the front, steady, expressionless, focused. He didn't glance at Carla once. He opened his laptop, connected it to the projector, and typed a few commands. The screen filled with code. "This," he said, his voice quiet but sharp, "is how you know something is true. Lent." And just like that, the whole courtroom shifted. Owen stood in front of the courtroom projector like he was about to brief a mission. His shoulders were square, his expression calm. The judge gave a small nod. "You may proceed." He didn't look at Carla, didn't glance at her lawyer. He just said, "When a document is real, it carries a mathematical signature. When it's altered, the signature breaks. I built Sentinel Chain to show those breaks." The lights dimmed as he hit a key. The first slide came up, two identical-looking files side by side. To most people, they were the same. But then numbers filled the screen. Time codes, metadata tags, hash strings. The audience leaned forward, squinting. Owen pointed to one line. "This value here is the timestamp created when Aunt Dana sent a document from her Air Force account in 2015. This one," he highlighted the next line, "was generated 2 weeks ago. They don't match. They can't match unless someone forged the original." "Oh?" Carla's lawyer stood immediately. "Objection. The witness is a minor, and this information is highly technical." The judge waved a hand. "He's not testifying. He's demonstrating. Continue, young man." Owen nodded once and clicked again. The next slide showed a sequence of connected dots, an animation tracing the IP trail from the source document to the forged version. Each pulse was a digital breadcrumb. "This IP address," he said, "belongs to a Denver service provider. It matches one used by a former Air Force technician named Travis Keene. He confirmed he was paid to copy and modify files." Carla's jaw tensed. Her lawyer shuffled papers, pretending to look for something that wasn't there. Owen wasn't performing. He was explaining, precise and calm. "This next sequence shows the emails Carla presented as evidence. You'll see multiple inconsistencies, metadata, embedded fonts, and revision histories that prove they were created after the news of Sentinel Chain's sale." He tapped another key, and the screen showed the words, "Data doesn't lie." I could hear the quiet hum of the air conditioner and the faint clicking of pens from the jury box. Every movement in the room had slowed to match Owen's rhythm. Carla finally snapped. "You're turning my son against me," she shouted, voice cracking. The judge's gavel hit hard. "Miss Bennett, you'll control yourself." Owen didn't flinch. He looked at her for the first time in years and said, "You turned yourself." That one sentence seemed to drain the air from the room. Lisa stood. "Your Honor, as the record shows, the fabricated files were created by Miss Bennett with assistance from Mr. Keene. The defendant not only attempted to defraud my client but to discredit her publicly. We're submitting digital evidence verified by the DA's forensic team, confirming every alteration." The judge turned toward Carla's lawyer. "Do you contest this?" He hesitated too long. "We request an independent analysis, Your Honor." The judge shook her head. "That's already been done. The analysis stands." Carla sank back into her chair, face pale, hands twisting her bracelet. Owen looked down at his laptop again. "May I show one more thing?" he asked. The judge hesitated, then nodded. Briefly, he pulled up one final display, a visual graph of document histories, colored threads branching like veins across the screen. This is the full record of everything Aunt Dana did for me. Every form, every signature, every medical appointment, every school authorization. They form one continuous chain. He highlighted one uninterrupted blue line. And this is what truth looks like. No breaks, no gaps. Well, then he clicked again, overlaying Carla's timeline, a red web full of holes and mismatched timestamps. And this is what lies look like. No one spoke. Even the bailiff stopped pretending to watch the clock. The judge finally leaned forward. That will be all, Mr. Miles. You may sit. Owen nodded once, unplugged the laptop, and returned to his seat beside me. His hands were steady. Mine weren't. The rest of the hearing moved quickly. The DA submitted Owen's data as evidence, along with Travis Keene's statement. Carla's lawyer tried one last desperate argument about maternal misunderstanding, but it was drowned out by the weight of math. You can argue emotion, but you can't argue hash values. When the judge finally spoke, her tone was firm. The court finds Miss Bennett guilty of document falsification, attempted fraud, and perjury. Custody and guardianship remain with Captain Dana Miles. Additionally, due to the defendant's actions, sentencing will include restitution and community service. I didn't smile. Neither did Owen. We just sat there in the hum of justice being restored. Carla's lawyer gathered his briefcase, like it might protect him from humiliation. Carla turned once before leaving, her expression collapsing from defiance into something emptier realization, maybe, not regret. That would have required empathy. As she was led out, Owen leaned over and said softly, "She tried to break the pattern. That never works." I let out a shaky breath and managed a small nod. "No, it doesn't." Lisa squeezed my shoulder. "You did it, Dana." I shook my head. "He did." Owen didn't respond, but his eyes flicked toward me, calm and sure. Outside the courthouse, the air felt sharper, like it had been waiting for this release. A few reporters called my name, shouting questions. "Captain Miles, is it true the Air Force was investigating you? Did your nephew really expose his own mother?" I didn't answer. Owen didn't even glance their way. He just walked to the car and got in, buckling his seatbelt like it was any other day. Halfway home, he said, "The system's restored." "What system?" "The truth," he said simply. "It's running clean again." End of rep. That night, after dinner, he sat at the table sketching something in his notebook columns of data, arrows, connections. "What are you working on?" I asked. "An update. For Sentinel Chain?" He nodded. "To make it stronger, so no one can use it to lie again." I watched him draw, his hand moving with the calm precision of someone who didn't carry resentment, just purpose. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt the tension in my shoulders finally ease. The world outside still thought this was a story about a prodigy who beat a scam. But for us, it was never about money. It was about the line between order and chaos, truth and noise, and the quiet power of someone who could tell the difference. Owen closed his notebook and looked at me. "Aunt Dana," he said, "you always said order is love." I nodded. "Still true." "Then we're good," he said. And somehow, in that moment, I believed it. The courthouse had emptied out, but the sound of that gavel still echoed in my head. Not because of the verdict those words were expected, but because of how Owen had delivered it without saying much at all. It wasn't anger or revenge or triumph. It was precision. The kind that left no room for argument. For years, I'd thought discipline was something you imposed. But sitting beside him that day, I realized it could also be something you became. We didn't celebrate afterward. We stopped by the same diner we'd gone to 100 times before. 2 grilled cheese sandwiches, 1 orange soda, 1 black coffee. Routine wasn't comfort anymore. It was language. Neither of us said the word victory. We didn't need to. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with an accent thick as her eyeliner, recognized us from the news. "That your boy?" she asked. "The one with the app?" "Yeah," I said, keeping my voice neutral. She smiled at him. "You're famous, kid." "And a cree." He didn't look up from his sandwich. "That's irrelevant," he said. She blinked, unsure if that was sarcasm or wisdom. Well, you did a good thing. He shrugged. I did a necessary thing. That was Owen in one sentence. Necessary. The Air Force closed their internal review the following week. Cleared of all allegations, was the official phrasing. I was reinstated, but I didn't rush back into uniform. I'd spent half my life running drills about honor. Owen had just given a real-time demonstration of what it actually looked like. Meanwhile, Sentinel Chain exploded. Once the trial transcripts leaked, everyone realized how solid the tech really was. Governments, universities, journalists, everybody wanted in. Overnight, it went from teen project to national security infrastructure. Owen didn't care about any of that. He spent most of his time debugging new features. He called the update Truth Map. When I asked what it did, he said, it connects verified truths across different systems. Like cross-referencing? No, he said. Like revealing structure. He showed me a demo documents, photos, and statements all mapped together visually, like constellations. The forged items appeared as static glitches that broke the symmetry. Lies, he said. Create noise in the data pattern. I stared at the screen, half in awe, half unsettled. So you can literally see dishonesty? Not dishonesty, he corrected. Inconsistency. People lie. Data just reports it. The military heard about his prototype, of course. They always do. One morning, I found 2 colonels and a cybersecurity officer waiting outside our house. They wanted a briefing. They'd read the court documents and were interested in licensing the updated system for defense-level integrity assurance. I told them he wasn't interested in working for the government. Captain Miles, one of them said, the system your nephew built could protect classified information globally. Or be used to justify surveillance, I said. Depends on who's holding the keys. They didn't like that answer, but they left their cards anyway. When I told Owen about it, he said, they'll use it wrong. You don't know that. Yes, I do. People break patterns to feel powerful. He wasn't bitter when he said it, just observant. The kind of observant that made people uncomfortable. Over the next few weeks, journalists tried to turn him into a symbol, the autistic teen who outsmarted corruption. Every story had the same script, some mix of pity, praise, and mysticism. I read one headline that called him, the boy who made truth unhackable. He saw it too. They're lying to make me look like a hero, he said. They're exaggerating, I corrected. Exaggeration is just slow lying. Couldn't argue with that. The attention eventually faded, as attention does. But the technology didn't. Sentinel Chain became standard for legal document verification within a year. The irony still made me laugh sometimes. Carla had tried to steal from him using forged data, and that theft had created a system that made future forgery impossible. The DA's office called to tell me her sentencing had been finalized. Probation, restitution, and 600 hours of community service at a local veterans support center. It wasn't prison, but it was poetic enough. Owen didn't react much when I told him, just said, she'll learn patterns there. I didn't ask what he meant. We started a foundation soon after his idea, not mine, the Eagle Path Foundation. Its goal was simple: teach veterans and neurodivergent teens basic programming and cybersecurity. The tagline he came up with was, "Order is love." When I asked him why that phrase, he said, because chaos hurts people, order keeps them safe. Action 7. The first class had 12 students, 4 vets, 8 kids. Owen didn't teach in the normal sense. He'd just sit at a laptop and start solving problems silently, letting others watch. No lectures, no slides. Just pattern. By the end of the session, half the room was following along. Afterward, one of the vets, a guy named Patrick who'd lost his leg to an IED, pulled me aside. "Your kid doesn't talk much," he said, "but he gets it. He gets how noise can wreck your brain." Unquote. That night, I told Owen what Patrick said. He just nodded and went back to coding. "He's right," he said. "Noise breaks trust. That's why I build filters." I didn't realize it until then, but that's what he'd been doing all along, building filters. For data, for people, for life. A world too loud needed someone like him to make it readable again. One morning, months later, I got a letter from Carla. No apology, no explanation, just a single handwritten line. I didn't know how to be her sister or his mother. I hope you can do both. I showed it to Owen. He read it once, expression unchanged, then handed it back. It's inconsistent, he said. How so? She says she hopes. But hope isn't data. That was the closest thing to forgiveness I'd ever hear from him. By the time he turned 18, he'd already been invited to speak at tech conferences across the country. He turned most of them down. Too many microphones, he said. Instead, he wrote short online essays about ethics in AI, about truth as architecture, about how order wasn't control, it was care. People called them manifestos. He called them documentation. When the first major news outlet asked for a feature story, he gave them one condition. No music, no emotional narration, just facts. The final segment aired on national television. No swelling soundtrack, no tears, no slow zooms. Just Owen explaining, in his flat, steady voice, how Sentinel Chain worked and why the world needed it. The interviewer asked him at the end, "You built a system that exposes lies. Do you ever wish people came with one too?" He paused for a long time before answering. "People already have one. It's called behavior. You just have to look at the pattern." The anchor smiled awkwardly, probably expecting something more quotable. But for once, America saw what I saw every day, not a prodigy or a savant, but a young man who understood the structure of truth better than most adults ever would. That night, he didn't watch the segment. Instead, he sat at the table with his laptop, humming quietly, the same rhythm he'd used when he was 5. I realized that was his piece. Not applause, not validation, just the sound of order returning to its place. And somehow, in that rhythm, I finally heard it too. The day felt quieter than it should have. The kind of quiet that didn't mean absence, just balance, like the world had stopped holding its breath. It had been 6 months since the hearing, but our lives still ran with military precision. Breakfast at 0700, emails at 0900, coding at 1300, dinner at 1900. Structure was our language, and routine was still the safest form of love we knew. Eagle Path had grown faster than either of us expected. What started as Owen teaching a few veterans and autistic teens in my garage had turned into a full training center near Peterson Air Force Base. The walls were plain, the lights bright but even no flicker, no hum, nothing unpredictable. Owen designed it himself, all the way down to the color temperature. He sat at the front during classes, never lecturing, just demonstrating. Most of the vets who came through didn't understand code, but they understood discipline, and they liked him for that. The kids loved him for a different reason. He didn't talk to them like they were broken. One of them, a 12-year-old named Miles, once asked him, "Why don't you tell us what to do?" Owen looked up from his keyboard and said, "Because you already know what you need to fix. You just haven't named it yet." That line stuck with me for weeks. Every once in a while, a journalist or some tech blogger would show up asking for an interview. They wanted the headline, "Autistic teen who exposed his mother now builds empathy through code," but he never accepted. "I'm not a story," he'd say. "I'm a process." I'd just laugh. That's the most Owen thing I've ever heard. He didn't disagree. Carla's court-ordered community service brought her to the same base area. She volunteered at the Aurora Autism Resource Center, ironically, just 2 blocks from Eagle Path. I didn't plan to see her, but fate doesn't check schedules. It was a Thursday morning when I ran into her in the parking lot. She was carrying a box of donated toys, hair tied back, wearing one of those volunteer vests that made everyone look equally tired. For a long moment, we just stood there. She looked older than I remembered, not ruined, just worn down in a way that honesty can do to a person once it finally catches up. "I heard about Eagle Path," she said softly. "It's good work." I nodded, keeping my arms crossed. "It's Owen's work. And..." She hesitated. "How is he?" "Focused," I said. "You'd probably call it obsessive. I call it purpose." She looked down, nodded. "I deserve that." I didn't argue. Before she could leave, I asked, "Why volunteer here? You could have done your hours anywhere." She looked up, eyes steady for once. "Because I needed to see what I didn't understand." I didn't forgive her. Not there, not then. But I didn't hate her anymore either. Hate is just another kind of noise, and Owen had taught me enough about filters to know when to use one. Later that evening, I mentioned it to Owen. He didn't stop typing, just said, She's aligning her variables. It took me a second to realize that was his version of mercy. By the end of that year, Owen's software had become the backbone of multiple government and corporate systems. Fraud detection, record verification, even public archives all ran through Sentinel Chain. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. A boy who once lined up toy cars by shade had now made the entire country accountable for its own order. One evening, I drove to his apartment with dinner. He lived close enough that I could see the faint glow of his monitors through the blinds. When I walked in, he was sitting at his desk, headphones off, his yellow cup still on the table, chipped at the rim. "Dinner?" I said, setting the bag down. He nodded. "Spaghetti?" "Yeah, extra butter." End quote. He turned in his chair. "You're consistent." "You're welcome," I said. We ate quietly, the way we always did. After a while, he put his fork down and said, "You remember when you told me order is love?" "Yeah." He leaned back slightly. "I think you were right, but not because order fixes things, because it lets you see what's broken." I sat there, fork halfway to my mouth, realizing that was the final piece I'd missed all these years. Order wasn't about perfection, it was about clarity. He kept talking, voice steady, words measured like he'd rehearsed them 1,000 times. "I used to think truth was the opposite of lies, but truth is just what survives when the lies collapse." That's when it hit me. Everything we'd lived through, the lawsuits, the betrayals, the years of exhaustion, it had all been one long filter pass. Every ugly thing had been noise clearing out so the signal could finally come through. He stood, picked up his cup, and rinsed it in the sink. "You know," he said, "you could retire now." "I'm not that old," I said, smiling. "You say that like it's a compliment." He dried the cup, set it down, and looked at me. "You've done your part, Aunt Dana. You restored the pattern." I wanted to tell him that was not true, that he was the one who'd done it, but he wouldn't have believed me. For him, everything was shared credit. Every result was co-authored by structure. I drove home that night under a clear Colorado sky. The mountains in the distance looked like they'd been carved by geometry itself, sharp, defined, symmetrical. For once, I didn't feel like I was surviving anything. I was just existing in the right order. A few months later, I got a message from Lisa. "You're not going to believe this," she said. "The DoD just contracted EaglePath to build a system-wide truth verification tool for mission logs. They want Owen to lead the research advisory." I laughed. They're finally learning to outsource integrity. That same week, Carla's volunteer term ended. She sent one last letter, typed this time, not handwritten. No apology again, just a statement. "I've been reading to nonverbal kids." One of them smiled at me yesterday. I didn't think I deserved that, but maybe grace isn't about deserving. I showed it to Owen. He read it, then said quietly, "That's consistent." And somehow, I knew he meant it. By the time spring came around, the foundation had doubled in size. Veterans taught logic. Teens taught code. Everyone taught patience. Owen walked through the halls one morning, adjusting a monitor stand, straightening a cable, making sure everything worked the way it should. He wasn't obsessive. He was maintaining love. When he turned 19, we had dinner like always, eggs, toast, and that yellow cup. I asked him what he wanted next. He thought about it for a moment, then said, "Peace. But I'll settle for clean data." That made me laugh harder than I'd laughed in years. Before I left, he said something I didn't expect. "You know, Aunt Dana, people think I made an app, but really I just documented what was already there." "What do you mean?" "The truth," he said. "It's always there. You just have to stop lying long enough to see the pattern." That night, I drove home again on the same route, same lights, same turns. Not because it was habit, but because it was right. The world finally made sense, and for once, it stayed that way. I parked, stepped inside, and sat down at my kitchen table, the same one where everything had started years ago. There was still a faint mark on the wood, where his yellow cup used to sit. I traced it with my fingers, smiled, and whispered to the empty room, "Order is love." And for the first time in a very long time, that felt like the whole truth.